May 27th, 1944. Time, 6:40 a.m. At dawn, on a silent Yugoslav island surrounded by cold water and German patrol boats, one man stood alone with no bullets left, no allies nearby, and no way out. Yet he did not surrender immediately. He raised a sword instead. How does a soldier armed with a medieval weapon survive modern war? And how does a prisoner escape captivity not once, but twice, in just a matter of hours? This is not a legend from a novel and not a scene from a movie. This moment is written in real wartime records. German troops had surrounded the small resistance force. Smoke from grenades drifted through the pine trees. Bodies lay scattered on the rocky ground, and the sound of gunfire faded into echoes over the sea. The man in the center of this chaos was wounded, exhausted, and completely alone. He had no ammunition left. He had only his sword and his bagpipes. Instead of hiding, instead of running, he played a tune. Witnesses later recalled that German soldiers froze in confusion, watching a strange figure playing music in the middle of battle. Moments later, he was struck by a grenade blast and lost consciousness. When he woke up, his hands were tied. Captured. But this would not be the end. It would be only the beginning of a story that defied logic. Because within hours, this prisoner would attempt the first escape. And after being caught again, he would escape a second time. Not by force. Not by weapon, but by refusing to accept that captivity was permanent. This raises a question that still disturbs historians today. How could one man escape twice from one of the most controlled military systems in Europe during the height of World War II? How could someone move through enemy territory without language, without supplies, and without help? And what does it mean when a human mind decides that walls, guards, and fear no longer exist? The story is not about victory or defeat. It is about survival. It is about choice. It is about the moment when a prisoner looks at the wire fence and decides, I will not stay here. This story does not glorify war. It reveals its chaos. It shows how fragile control can be, and how dangerous hope becomes when it refuses to die. From a burning battlefield in Yugoslavia, to prison trains, to guarded camps deep inside enemy territory, this man's journey would turn capture into escape, and escape into legend. But before the escapes, before the prison camps, before the sword and the music, there was a world already breaking apart. To understand why this escape mattered, we must go back to the war itself, and to the moment when Europe was collapsing under occupation. May 1944, Europe was already burning. The Second World War had entered its fifth year, and much of the continent was under German military control. Resistance movements had formed across occupied regions, especially in Yugoslavia, where local fighters were trying to disrupt supply routes and communication lines. Small Allied command units were sent into these areas to support resistance forces, sabotage railroads, and weaken enemy positions. These missions were dangerous, isolated, and often cut off from any rescue. The operation on the Yugoslav island of Brač was one such mission. A small group of soldiers was sent to strike German positions and withdraw quickly before reinforcements arrived. Their role was not to conquer land, but to confuse, delay, and disrupt. The man who would be captured that morning was part of this force. He was not a high-ranking general. He was not a politician. He was simply a soldier who believed that movement was survival. But this mission failed. German patrol boats surrounded the island. Machine gun fire trapped the resistance fighters between the sea and the rocks. Explosions filled the narrow paths. Within minutes, most of the group was killed or wounded. Only one man remained standing when the firing stopped. He was injured. He was alone, and he was surrounded. The German soldiers believed they had ended the fight. Instead, they had created a prisoner who would not remain a prisoner. He was taken to a nearby holding area and questioned. Because of his unusual appearance and strange behavior, German officers suspected he might be a relative of British leadership, and this misunderstanding would shape what happened next. Rather than being sent to a standard prisoner camp immediately, he was placed on a transport train bound for Germany. This decision would prove critical. On the journey, the train passed through mountainous terrain. Guards were tired. Security was not absolute, and the prisoner saw opportunity. According to later accounts, he waited until night fell. He broke free from his restraints. He jumped from the moving train into darkness. His first escape had taken place. But freedom did not last long. Within days, exhausted and without food, he was recaptured near the border. This made his situation worse. Now he was considered dangerous. Now he was watched more closely. He was sent to a higher security facility. Yet captivity did not change his thinking. He studied routines. He watched guard movements. He measured time. And when another chance appeared, he ran again. This second escape attempt would take him through forests, villages, and open roads, walking for days toward what he believed was neutral territory. But the landscape of war was confusing. Front lines shifted, borders vanished, and once again he was caught. This time he was placed in a camp designed for prisoners who repeatedly tried to escape. A camp surrounded by walls, watchtowers, and armed patrols. The system believed it had finally contained him. But history would soon prove that systems built on fear cannot fully control a mind that refuses to accept imprisonment. These 2 captures and 2 escapes were not acts of heroism in the traditional sense. They were acts of human refusal. Refusal to stay still. Refusal to wait. Refusal to believe that the war had already decided his fate. And this is where the real story begins. Because the next escape would not be from a train or a forest. It would be from one of the most guarded prisoner systems in Europe. And it would change how his name would be remembered forever. The camp was built for men who would not stop trying. High fences of barbed wire cut the land into squares. Wooden watchtowers stood at every corner, and guards walked slow circles with rifles hanging from their shoulders. The prisoners called it a cage for restless minds. It was meant to remove hope, to replace movement with routine, and to turn days into identical shadows. Inside this camp, the man who had escaped twice before was given a number instead of a name. He was searched, stripped of tools, and placed among others who had also tried to run. The Germans believed this was the final answer to his problem of freedom. But captivity did not quiet him, it sharpened him. Every morning, he watched the guards change shifts. Every afternoon, he studied the fence lines. Every night, he listened to the wind and memorized its sound. He did not speak much. He conserved energy. He measured time in footsteps and heartbeats. He noticed which guard limped slightly. He noticed which gate was open for food wagons. He noticed which tower looked away for 2 seconds longer than the others. Weeks passed. Winter approached. Food became thinner. Men grew weaker. Yet inside him, the idea of escape did not grow smaller, it grew clearer. One evening, as prisoners were being counted, he saw a brief confusion between 2 guards arguing about paperwork. The fence near the kitchen wagon was open for less than a minute. That minute was enough. He slipped through shadows, crawling beneath wire where the soil had been softened by rain. His uniform was torn, his hands bled, but he did not stop. He ran into the forest without looking back. This was his 3rd escape attempt. The forest was dark and unfamiliar. Snow had begun to fall. He had no map, no food, and no clear direction. He believed that moving south would lead him to neutral territory. He walked at night and hid during the day. He drank from streams and ate roots when he could find them. For several days, he survived only on stubborn motion. But war does not care about direction. One morning, he woke to the sound of boots and dogs. Patrols were searching the woods. He tried to run, but exhaustion slowed him. His legs failed him near a small village road. He was captured again. This time, the guards did not shout. They looked tired of him. He was placed on a truck and driven to another camp, one designed for the most difficult prisoners. It was a mountain fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, snow-covered cliffs. The prisoners whispered that no one escaped from there. Inside, life became even stricter. Roll calls lasted hours. Punishments were severe. Windows were narrow slits. Freedom felt farther away than ever. Yet something unexpected happened. The war began to change. Bombing grew louder in the distance. Guards spoke in worried voices. Supply trucks arrived less often. Rumors passed through the camp that enemy lines were collapsing in certain regions. The man listened carefully. He understood something simple. When systems weaken, cracks appear. He gathered 2 other prisoners who believed the same thing. They waited for a night when the air raid sirens sounded in a nearby town. Guards moved to shelters. Searchlights turned away from the inner yard. The 3 men climbed through a window using a rope made from blankets. They slid down the outer wall and ran into the mountains. This was his 4th escape attempt. Cold cut into their lungs. Snow hid their tracks, but also hid their path. One man fell and could not rise. Another turned back. Only he continued forward. Days passed. Hunger returned. Silence surrounded him. He reached a road and began walking openly, pretending to be a civilian. His uniform had been replaced with stolen clothes. His beard made him look older. His face looked empty of identity. But a patrol recognized his accent. Once again, he was arrested. For the 4th time. Now the Germans believed he was not just a prisoner, but a problem. He was transferred to a special camp for escape artists. Guards there did not treat him as a soldier, but as a moving risk. They removed anything he could use. They locked doors twice. They counted him 3 times a day. He no longer ran immediately. Instead, he waited. Time passed. Seasons changed. Then, one day, something strange happened. The guards left their posts. The gates opened. No one gave orders. The sound of gunfire approached from far away. The camp commander fled. The war had reached them. In confusion, prisoners pushed through open fences. Some ran in every direction, others froze in disbelief. He did not hesitate. He walked out of the camp and into a collapsing world. For the first time, he was not escaping from guards. He was escaping from war itself. He walked for days until he reached approaching Allied troops. He raised his hands and spoke in his own language. He was free. Not because of clever tricks, not because of weapons, but because he refused to accept stillness. His story was not about winning battles, it was about refusing cages. And yet, one final test remained. What does a man do after escaping 4 times from death itself? That question would be answered not in combat, but in reflection. Because survival leaves marks that do not fade when the gates open. Freedom did not arrive with celebration. It arrived quietly, like a door opening in a burning house. When he reached Allied lines, soldiers stared at him as if he were a ghost. His clothes were torn, his body was thin, his eyes carried something older than the war itself. Medical officers examined him and found scars, frostbite, and exhaustion, but no broken spirit. They asked him one question: "How did you survive?" He had no simple answer. Because survival was not a single act. It was thousands of small decisions. Do I move or wait? Do I run or hide? Do I accept fear or challenge it? Each escape had taken something from him: strength, friends, time, certainty. Each capture had taught him something new: patience, observation, silence. The climax of his story was not a final chase or a gunfight. It was the moment he stepped through an open gate while the camp collapsed behind him. No guard stopped him, no fence held him, no order commanded him. War itself had lost control. That moment showed something rare in history. Not the power of armies, but the weakness of systems when chaos replaces command. He was sent home after the war ended. People expected stories of heroism and triumph. Instead, he spoke simply. He talked about walking, about hunger, about cold nights, about the feeling of wire cutting into skin, about the sound of dogs in forests, about the fear that never fully leaves. He did not praise himself. He did not praise any nation. He spoke of human will. The lesson of his escapes was not about bravery in battle. It was about refusal in captivity. He showed that imprisonment does not begin with fences. It begins when a person believes escape is impossible. When others stayed still, he moved. When others waited, he acted. When others believed the war decided everything, he believed choice still existed. Yet the cost was heavy. Many who ran with him never reached freedom. Some froze in mountains, some were shot, some vanished without names. His story carries their silence within it. Victory did not erase loss. Freedom did not undo memory. Years later, when people asked why he escaped so many times, he answered with calm words: "I was a soldier. Soldiers move forward." That sentence was not pride, it was explanation. In a world where millions were trapped by borders, camps, and fear, one man refused to remain still. Not because he thought he was stronger than the system, but because standing still felt like death. His story teaches that war does not only destroy bodies, it tests the mind. It asks who will surrender to circumstance and who will resist it. The climax was not the collapse of a camp. The climax was the survival of a decision. A decision made again and again. To walk. To try. To escape. And the resolution was simple. He lived. Not as a symbol of victory, but as proof that even inside controlled worlds, the human will can break patterns. History records his captures. History records his escapes. But history cannot fully measure what it cost. The nights without sleep. The hunger without end. The fear without comfort. Those things remain invisible. What remains visible is the path he walked out of captivity, step by step, into uncertainty, carrying nothing but movement and belief. That is how the story ends. Not with applause. Not with flags. but with a man walking away from a camp that no longer had power over him. Freedom did not erase the memory of wire, or the sound of boots in the forest, or the fear that followed every step. It only changed the direction of his walking. When the war ended, the man who had escaped again and again returned to a quiet world that could not fully understand what captivity had taught him. He had learned that control is fragile, and that fear survives only when people accept it. Each escape was not an act of glory, but an act of decision. A decision to move instead of freeze. A decision to trust motion more than walls. A decision to believe that tomorrow could be different from today. History often remembers battles and commanders, but it forgets the long hours between them. It forgets hunger, cold, and silence. It forgets the prisoners who counted days by shadows and measured hope by footsteps. His story brings those forgotten hours back into view. The escapes did not change the course of the war. They did not destroy armies or end suffering. But they revealed something about the human spirit inside machines of control. Even the most guarded systems depend on order. When order breaks, courage finds a doorway. Many who tried to escape never reached freedom. Their names remain unknown. Their paths vanished into forests and snow. His survival carries their absence. It reminds us that every escape story also contains loss. In later years, when asked why he never stopped trying, he gave no dramatic speech. He spoke with calm honesty. He said that movement was life and stillness felt like surrender. Those words hold no nation and no flag. They belong only to human will. This story is not about victory. It is about refusal. Refusal to believe that cages define destiny. Refusal to let fear write the final chapter. Refusal to stay silent when silence becomes a prison. War builds fences of steel and rules. Humanity answers with choice and motion. Between these two forces, history is written. In the end, the meaning of his journey is simple. A man walked out of captivity because he never accepted that captivity was permanent. And by walking, he reminded the world that even in its darkest systems, freedom can still be imagined. That imagination is not loud, it does not shout, it walks quietly, one step at a time, until the gate is no longer there. I've just said what's recorded in history. You should find out the real truth yourself. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video. And we have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. If this World War II story moved you, like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more forgotten histories of prisoners, civilians, and survival in war. Every story matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. See you in the next WWII story.